This story is true and it happened to me on April 2017 in Caracas. My then girlfriend, now wife, and I had been staying at my mother-in-law's apartment for a few weeks because my mother's apartment, where we lived, was being remodeled at the time. For some context, the apartment where we were staying is located on the 4th floor of a relatively small 10-floor building, which was positioned right in front of the city's main highway. I say small because there are very tall buildings in my city, which were as tall as 40 or 50 floors. So, there were a lot of things I had to get used to in that place. Chief among them was hearing the sounds of cars, trucks, bikes, flat tires, damaged exhaust pipes, and occasional gunshots that came from the poor neighborhoods that were close to my girlfriend's home, which could be heard during the day and night. In contrast, my mother's neighborhood was usually very quiet, especially at night, so I had to change my sleeping habits a little bit, so I usually went to bed quite late at night, usually at midnight or 1 a.m. This apartment was smaller than my apartment and it was located on a different side of the city, but I did not care about those things as long as I could get a good night's sleep next to my wife, since I suffered from insomnia sometimes. The first time I came to my wife's apartment, I noticed there was a small hill with a huge tree, some medium, small-sized plants, bushes, and patches of grass, which were right next to the highway, and this seemed a little creepy to me at night. On that hill, I noticed there was a small makeshift aluminum shack. I thought that was a little funny and I thought to myself, well, that's weird, maybe some hobo or homeless person lives there. If he does, he must crazy to be living there. On the first 2 nights I stayed there, even though I could hear the loud sounds of the highway, it took me a while to fall asleep, but fortunately everything was okay and I was able to get a good night's sleep on those 2 days, but the third night, as much as I wanted it to be exactly the same, it was quite different than the first. I remember it was late at night, I think it was midnight or even later, and I was almost sound asleep. I was listening to some horror stories on my cell phone to fall asleep to, just like I always did, however crazy that sounds. Suddenly, I was startled by the ear-piercing screams of some man or woman hurling a long string of F-bombs and other curses at somebody or something else. This woke me up right away and scared the hell out of me at the same time. I thought to myself, what or who the hell was that? And I shook my wife's shoulder and told her, hey honey, did you hear that? And she was still asleep, but responded, hear what? It was nothing, go back to bed. However, I heard the curses again, so I decided to investigate what the heck was going on. I got up from bed, rubbed my eyes, put on my slippers and walked slowly and quietly out of our bedroom towards the balcony, where I could clearly see the highway and the small hill next to it. Now I could still hear the curses more clearly and it sounded like the voice of a deranged man, and I thought to myself, maybe I was right and there is indeed a homeless person living on that metal hut. I was now standing shirtless, in my boxers and slippers on the dark balcony looking to that hill, where I saw that metal hut on the first day I slept in my wife's apartment. Weirdly enough, I was able to see a small campfire and a barefoot man coming out of the shack, who had long, disheveled hair and a long bushy beard. He was shirtless and wearing torn pants that were almost destroyed. He came out of the small shack. He was smoking a cigarette, or God only knows what drug he was taking. He was standing in that hill in the dark, screaming his lungs out and cursing a lot for some reason while he was looking towards the highway. I thought that this man must be crazy, getting high, or drunk enough to be yelling at passing cars or the people or dogs that were all the way on the other side of the highway. This made me feel terrified and I asked myself, what in holy hell is that guy saying, and isn't he cold? Because of this racket there were some neighborhood dogs barking in this man's direction. I thought it was really strange for someone to scream so much, especially this late at night. Unfortunately for me, my mother-in-law was a night owl-like and usually slept in the living room, so she turned on the kitchen's light out of the blue to get some water and went back to sleep, which reflected a little bit towards the balcony. I turned my head around and was a little blinded by the glare of the light, but at the same time I was scared that this man would see me staring at him. In that moment, I had crouched below the window, so the man could not see me, but I was horrified when I saw this man walk to the fire and angrily put out the fire with his bare feet, turn his head around from the highway to look at the outer wall of the building, and all the while was still cursing out loud. I thought to myself, well, maybe he's having a bad trip or something. Suddenly, I was startled by the ear-piercing screams of some man or woman hurling a long string of F-bombs and other curses at somebody or something else. This woke me up right away and started to repeatedly bash his head into the wall until his head was bleeding, while he yelled, "Get out of my head." The sound it made was terrifying. When he was done, he touched his head with his right hand and cleaned the blood on his chest. Now he looked crazier than ever. Out of the blue, the guy looked up and noticed I was staring at him, so he yelled at me, "What the hell are you looking at? Mind your own business, you idiot." Therefore, I was scared to death, so I threw myself to the balcony's ceramic floor. I winced at how cold it was and hid there for a while. I thought to myself, out of sight, out of mind, right? The crazy guy kept screaming his curses at me. I decided that was enough for me and quietly crouched back to the bed. I felt horrified about I saw and could not sleep anything that night, since all I could hear were my mother-in-law's snores and the guy's screams until 2 a.m. The next day, I felt extremely tired because I was not able to rest the night before. I told my wife about had happened, so she told me, "Yeah, at some point you get used to that crazy guy and his screams," but she didn't believe that the guy bashed his head into the wall and almost killed himself. So it dawned on me, what if I can hear this guy's screams tonight again? Should I call the cops on this guy? But I decided not to do it, because my country's police are basically useless, so I still don't know what to do about this crazy screaming man. His awful screams still give me nightmares, but I know I will never look out of the balcony window at night again.